The full, detailed, true story of Oliver Cromwell, a man who rose from modest gentry to become the military and political leader of England, a king killer, and a controversial Lord Protector. Oliver Cromwell, the Puritan revolutionary who ruled England. Oliver Cromwell's story is not one of a monarch or a traditional aristocrat, but of a country gentleman whose deep Puritan faith and political convictions propelled him to the forefront of a revolution that would forever change the course of British history. The making of a Puritan gentleman, 1599–1640. Oliver Cromwell was born on April 25, 1599, in Huntingdon, England, into a family of minor gentry. His grandfather, Sir Henry Cromwell, was a wealthy landowner known as the Golden Knight, but his father, Robert Cromwell, was a younger son with a more modest estate. Education and early life. He attended Huntingdon Grammar School and later Sidney Sussex College, Cambridge, a college known for its Puritan sentiments. His stay there was cut short by his father's death in 1617, forcing him to return home to manage the family estates. He later studied law in London, a common path for gentlemen. Conversion experience. In his late 20s, Cromwell underwent a profound religious conversion. He became an intensely devout Puritan, a term for Protestants who sought to purify the Church of England of all remaining Catholic rituals and hierarchies. He believed in a personal, direct relationship with God, guided by conscience and the Bible. This faith became the central driving force of his life. Family man. In 1620, he married Elizabeth Bouchier, the daughter of a wealthy London merchant. The marriage was long and by all accounts happy, producing 9 children. For the next 2 decades, he lived the life of a struggling gentleman farmer, wrestling with debt and depression, which he interpreted as a spiritual struggle for God's grace. The reluctant MP and the slide to war, 1640–1642. Cromwell's political career began late. He was elected to Parliament in 1640, first to the Short Parliament and then to the famous Long Parliament. A voice for reform. In Parliament, he immediately aligned himself with the critics of King Charles I. He was not a leading figure yet, but he made his mark as a fierce and passionate speaker against the Archbishop of Canterbury, William Laud, and the king's policies, which Parliament viewed as tyrannical and popish, leaning towards Catholicism. The Great Divide. The conflict centered on the fundamental question of sovereignty. Did ultimate power reside in the king or in Parliament? Charles I believed in the divine right of kings. Parliament, fueled by Puritan members like Cromwell, believed the king was subject to the law. This dispute over power, money, and religion became irreconcilable. The outbreak of war. In 1642, negotiations broke down completely. King Charles raised his royal standard in Nottingham, declaring war on his own Parliament. England was plunged into civil war. The Ironside commander, from captain to lieutenant general, 1642–1649. This was Cromwell's crucible. Despite no prior military experience, he revealed a genius for warfare. The Ironsides, he raised a cavalry troop from his home region, the Eastern Association. His unit quickly gained a legendary reputation for discipline, morale, and unwavering courage in battle. They were nicknamed Ironsides, a name that later extended to Cromwell himself. His secret? He promoted soldiers based on merit and ability, not on their social class or nobility, and he filled the ranks with men who shared his intense Puritan faith, believing they were fighting God's war. Marston Moor, 1644. Cromwell's cavalry was decisive in securing a major victory for Parliament, effectively giving them control of the north of England. New Model Army. Shocked by the lack of professionalism in other parliamentary forces, Cromwell was instrumental in creating the New Model Army in 1645, a national, professional, and highly disciplined force. Naseby, 1645. As Lieutenant General of Horse, Cromwell was again crucial in the decisive battle that shattered the king's main army. The war was effectively won, the Second Civil War and the king's fate. After defeat, Charles I was captured but continued to plot, even making a secret deal with the Scots to invade England. This Second Civil War in 1648 hardened Cromwell's resolve. He saw Charles as a man of blood who would not keep his word and was a threat to the peace of the nation. Pride's Purge. In December 1648, the New Model Army, led by Colonel Thomas Pride and backed by Cromwell, purged Parliament of any members who still sought a compromise with the king. This left a rump parliament of around 80 hardline members. Regicide. The rump parliament established a high court of justice to try Charles I for treason. Cromwell was its most powerful advocate. After a trial the king refused to acknowledge, he was found guilty. On January 30th, 1649, Charles I was beheaded outside the banqueting house in Whitehall. Cromwell was one of the first to sign the death warrant. This act sent shockwaves throughout Europe. Lord Protector of the Commonwealth, 1649-1658. With the king dead, the monarchy and the House of Lords were abolished. England became a republic known as the Commonwealth. The conquest of Ireland, 1649-1650. Cromwell led a brutal military campaign to crush royalist resistance in Ireland. The sieges of Drogheda and Wexford were particularly infamous. Cromwell's forces massacred thousands of soldiers and civilians after the towns fell. In Irish historical memory, Cromwell is a figure of unparalleled cruelty and bigotry. His actions were driven by a combination of revenge for earlier massacres of Protestants, anti-Catholicism, and a desire to terrorize other garrisons into surrender. The conquest of Scotland. He then defeated a Scottish army who had proclaimed Charles II king at the Battle of Dunbar, 1650, and again decisively at the Battle of Worcester, 1651, where he famously called his victory the crowning mercy. The dissolution of the rump. Frustrated by the corruption and self-interest of the remaining rump parliament, Cromwell marched into the House of Commons in April 1653 and forcibly dissolved it with the famous words, "You have sat too long for any good you have been doing. Depart, I say, and let us have done with you. In the name of God, go." The bare-bones parliament. He then attempted to rule through a hand-picked assembly of godly men nicknamed the bare-bones parliament. It proved too radical and ineffective and collapsed within months. The instrument of government. In 1653, a written constitution, the first in English history, named Cromwell Lord Protector of the Commonwealth of England, Scotland, and Ireland. He was effectively a military dictator. Though he refused the crown when it was offered to him in 1657, his rule as Lord Protector. Cromwell's rule was a paradox. He had fought against one-man rule but became an autocrat himself. His England was a puritanical state. Religious tolerance mere for some. He allowed greater religious freedom for Protestants outside the Church of England, like Independents and Baptists, but not for Anglicans or Catholics, whose practices were suppressed. Strict social laws. Theaters were closed, sports were banned, and strict observance of the Sabbath was enforced. Foreign policy success. He pursued an aggressive and successful foreign policy. His navy won victories against the Dutch and the Spanish, and he expanded England's influence overseas. Constant unrest. His rule was never stable. He faced constant threats from royalist plots, Republican discontent, and military unrest. Death and legacy, 1658, present. Death. Worn down by the immense burden of power and possibly by malaria, Oliver Cromwell died at Whitehall on September 3, 1658, the anniversary of his great victories at Dunbar and Worcester. The Restoration. His son, Richard Cromwell, succeeded him but lacked his father's authority. The political system quickly unraveled, and in 1660 the monarchy was restored with Charles II. Posthumous execution. In a macabre act of revenge in 1661, the new royalist government had Cromwell's body exhumed from Westminster Abbey, posthumously executed by hanging at Tyburn, and beheaded. His head was displayed on a pole outside Westminster Hall for over 20 years. The fate of his body is unknown. Oliver Cromwell remains one of the most controversial figures in British history. He is a man of stark contradictions, a dictator who fought against tyranny, a champion of parliamentary liberty who dissolved parliaments by force, a man of deep religious conviction who sanctioned brutal massacres, a revolutionary who became a conservative ruler. His legacy is dual. In Britain, he is seen as a key figure in the long journey towards constitutional monarchy and parliamentary democracy. He proved that a king could be held accountable to the law. In Ireland, he is remembered as a ruthless conqueror whose policies had devastating long-term consequences. There is no single true story of Oliver Cromwell, only the story of a complex, formidable, and fiercely determined man who, for better and for worse, shaped the modern world by helping to slay the divine right of kings.